Dad decided to marry his much younger girlfriend just 2 weeks after my mom died. He gave me an ultimatum: attend the wedding or get kicked out of the house. So I went, but I made sure it was a day he'd never forget, and one he'd seriously regret ever threatening me over. My father was always awful to me, even from a very young age. It was clear he had no interest in being a parent, but I could never tell if he despised being married to my mother more, or being a father to me. I suspect he hated both equally, as he treated my mother no better than he treated me. I turned 17 a few months ago, and just 4 weeks back, I lost my mother. Her passing wasn't a surprise. She had been battling lung cancer for quite some time, and she finally succumbed to it at the hospital 4 weeks ago. She received her diagnosis 3 years prior, and since then, it felt like I'd been holding my breath. When she passed away, I think I finally let it all go. She was my best friend, and it still feels incredibly surreal not to have her around. Most importantly, she was the only one who protected me from my father. I grew up in a house where my parents argued daily about one thing or another. It was obvious they didn't love each other, and I honestly don't know why they stayed married. Each time I asked my mother why she married him, she'd say they had loved each other at some point and always made up. But I was never able to forgive my father as quickly as my mom did. I'd urge her to leave him many times because sometimes during their fights, he'd say truly awful things to her. He'd express regret about ever being with her and having a child, even wishing she'd pass from her illness so he could move on with his life. I repeatedly told her to leave, but she simply refused, and I don't understand why. As for me, I wanted to leave since I was 4 years old, but I had nowhere else to go and no other family. My mother was an orphan. She lost her parents in an accident when she was very young and was raised by her grandmother, who passed away when she was in college. She wasn't in touch with any other family members, and I didn't know my father's side of the family because he never took us to meet them. He claimed he didn't get along with his family, which was why he didn't want us to meet them. There was no further explanation, and I was too afraid to ask him. I was used to being yelled at for things, so I wasn't about to invite more trouble by prying into something like that. Regardless, my parents were the only family I had, which meant I had to endure my father because my mother wouldn't leave. After her death, I was devastated, but my dad carried on as if nothing had happened. This wasn't surprising in the slightest, as he behaved the same way even when she was sick. I didn't expect him to care because I knew he wasn't capable of loving anyone. What genuinely surprised me, though, was that just 2 weeks after my mother's passing, once the funeral and formalities were over, my dad brought home a much younger woman. She was simply there one morning, sipping coffee in our living room. When I found the courage to ask my father who she was, he told me she was my new mother. He even had the biggest, probably creepiest smile on his face as he said it. Despite myself, I couldn't help but comment on it, telling him it was far too soon to introduce his girlfriend, given it had only been 2 weeks since my mother passed. That earned me a lecture about how she would be my stepmother in a few days, and I needed to respect her. He informed me that my mother's death was irrelevant. I had to respect this woman and treat her just like I treated my own mom. I was furious and tried to argue, so he dropped another bombshell, announcing he was getting married. He explained that ever since my mother's diagnosis, he knew she wouldn't make it because she had always been frail as long as he'd known her. So, he had begun searching for replacements, that was his exact word, and had been with Melissa, his girlfriend, for the past 2 years. He told me that with my mother finally out of the way, he was going to remarry and ensure her passing wouldn't disrupt his life in any way. It finally made sense why her illness and death hadn't affected him. He had already replaced her. I was disgusted and utterly repulsed by him. I told him I wouldn't be attending the wedding, expecting him to be fine with it. Honestly, why would he care? But then he said my attendance was necessary. That surprised me. And when I asked why, he explained that only if I attended would he be able to make this seem normal and acceptable to others. Apparently, according to him, my presence at the wedding would signify my acceptance. And if his own daughter had no issue with the marriage, no one else would have cause to comment. So, basically, he needed me there to make it appear less depraved, which was quite psychotic in itself. I honestly believe my father had lost his mind. Not only was he uttering such bizarre and senseless things, but he was also getting married just 2 weeks after his wife's passing, without caring what others might say. And not only that, the woman he was marrying was only a couple of years older than me. She was 25 at most. I don't know her exact age, but she couldn't be older than that, and my dad is in his late 40s. It's creepy enough as it is, compounded by the fact that this man recently lost his wife to cancer. I should be grieving right now, but instead he's getting married and expecting his daughter to pretend this is all normal and that she supports it. It's a total recipe for disaster, and I truly believe he belongs in a straitjacket in a padded room. When he told me he was marrying Melissa, I stated there was no way I could attend this wedding, and if he wanted to be offended by that, he was welcome to. But then he told me he wouldn't just be offended. He'd kick me out if I didn't attend, and he'd also ensure I didn't access the college fund he and my mother had been setting aside for me since birth. I thought that was incredibly unfair because, as he had said, it wasn't just his money that had gone into the college fund, but also my mom's, and I believed I was entitled to it. Unfortunately, I couldn't force him to hand over that money to me since it's not legally required. It wasn't like he had specifically earmarked it for that use, as there were no documents to prove it. So, basically, if I didn't attend that wedding, I'd be kicked out and wouldn't have any prospects of going to college either. I was in a truly difficult situation because on one hand, I didn't want to appear to be a part of this, or to encourage this madness in any way whatsoever. But on the other hand, I also had to look out for myself because there were still a couple of months before I left for college, and I couldn't afford to lose out on money since I didn't have any of my own, and it would take some time for my mother's will to be processed, and only then would I receive the inheritance. So for now, it seemed like I had no other option but to attend the wedding and make it appear as though I was supporting my father. I was told about the wedding last week, but I honestly couldn't bring myself to accept it, so I decided I had to go all out to stop this from happening, or at least try to do something to his face. I told my father I would be attending the wedding, but then I started trying to find something, anything, to disrupt what was going on because I just couldn't bring myself to allow this to happen. I honestly didn't even know what I was looking for. I just wanted something, and I got incredibly lucky, miraculously lucky, when my father left his laptop unattended. He and Melissa went out for dinner a couple of days ago to celebrate their upcoming marriage, and I was alone at home. My dad had left his laptop on the coffee table. I didn't expect anything when I opened it since it was locked, so I tried to guess the password, and luckily, I got it right. It was Melissa's name followed by his own birthday, which was strangely shocking. Anyway, once I was in, I could barely believe it. I started going through his social media, and initially, I found nothing. But then I realized he had 2 Facebook profiles, and I decided to go through the other one, which I hadn't seen earlier. To my surprise, that was his secret account, just for his side of the family. He had been telling my mother and me that he didn't get along with his family. But here he was on his other profile, hanging out with people we had never seen before who looked like they were definitely related to him. The more I scrolled, the more photos I found dating back years. It was very obvious that he had been in touch with his family all along. He had just been lying to us. Then I decided to go through his messages on that account, and I found out he had been in touch with his parents for a really long time. I'm guessing he also had another phone. He had essentially been leading a double life, right from the beginning, and nobody had a clue. My mother and I had never known about any of this, and even if she had known, she had never told me about it. I was pretty sure his family had no idea that I even existed. After reviewing his conversations with his father on that account, I realized his father thought he was living away from home for work and nothing else. Little did he know, he had a whole family here. I quickly took photos of those chats and went to my own phone so I could contact my grandfather. I was quite nervous because I had no idea if he would even believe me, as all of this was so ridiculous I could barely believe myself. Nevertheless, I went to my room and logged into my own Facebook account and contacted the profile I had seen on my dad's account. Just as I had suspected, there were 0 mutual friends, which is why I had never been able to find him. I hadn't even known my grandfather's real name for all these years, which is why I had never been able to track these people. Now that I had his account, I messaged him immediately and tried to explain everything as quickly as I could. I gave him my phone number and told him to contact me as soon as possible because this was an emergency. I attached some photos of the screenshots I had taken, explaining that this is how I had been able to track his profile, and I also attached some photos of me with my parents, so that he would know that this wasn't a prank on him. I didn't receive a response for the next 12 hours, and had almost given up, thinking he might believe someone was playing a trick on him, and decided not to reply. But when my dad was at work, I finally received a call from my grandfather. I was just lucky he hadn't spoken to my father about this, and had called me beforehand. Anyway, as soon as he called, I answered and explained what was happening. He told me that for the past 17 years, he had been led to believe that my father was living away from Iowa, where he was originally from, for his work. He had even visited his son several times, and apparently, my dad had a separate house and everything here, which is where my grandparents had stayed whenever they visited him. They had not the slightest clue about any of this. For the past 12 hours, they had just been trying to recover from the shock of it all. Initially, this all seemed like a prank to them, but when they saw my mother and the family photos I had sent, they realized that it was all true. Apparently, the reason my father had never told his parents about his marriage and the family he had was because he had told them he had broken up with my mother since they didn't approve of her 18 years back. When my parents had initially started dating, my grandparents had made it very clear that they did not want my father to marry my mother. And so he had told them that he had dumped her, and that's the lie that he had been peddling for the past 2 decades. But now he had finally been caught. The reason my grandparents didn't want my father to marry my mother was quite serious. It was because my mother had apparently tried to flirt with his older brother, a surgeon who obviously earned much more than my father. However, my grandparents found out about it because my uncle refused to keep quiet about something so serious, and they demanded that my father break up with my mother. But he refused to do so, and I think it was because of me, because according to my calculations, my mother was probably already pregnant by then. Then my parents gave him an ultimatum. He could either break up with my mother, or they would cut him out of their lives, as they knew that if they cut him off, my mother would leave him because they believed she was only with him for the money. My dad eventually told them that he had broken things off with my mother, but clearly not, since they continue to stay together. And that's why I'm here. I don't know why they stay together if my mother had actually done such things, and this completely changed my perception of both my parents. Anyway, once I learned these things, I told my grandparents how poorly I was being treated and that I couldn't count on anyone else. But now that I knew they existed, and I wasn't as alone as I had initially believed, I was counting on them for help. However, if they turned their backs on me, I would still understand. Thankfully, they chose to help me out, and I was able to stop the wedding from happening, and I got back at my father as well. And so did his parents. They flew down here a couple of days ago, and yesterday, I managed to sneak them into the wedding, and all of a sudden, we were the guests of honor. The wedding was being held in our backyard, since only a couple of people were attending. It was meant to be a small and intimate ceremony. It was just my father's coworkers and employer, a couple of his friends, and that was it. Obviously, he had not invited his family. They hadn't even been invited to his first wedding, but I made it possible for them to attend the second. After Melissa had walked down the aisle and everything, I texted my grandparents and told them that it was finally time for them to show up because I wanted to stop this before the vows happened. Right before the vows, I snuck out, and then it was my turn to walk down the aisle with my grandparents, just for the theatrics of it all. As soon as my father saw me walking down the aisle with his parents, his face fell, and Melissa looked pretty confused as well. Once I was near him, I announced that I had finally uncovered all his lies, and now his parents knew the truth, so he could say goodbye to his inheritance because that was not coming to him anymore. It was all coming to me instead. And I didn't need him anymore either, since I already had a place to live and people to take care of me, and also my college fund. So he could do whatever he wanted since I knew he was a liar, and I did not wish to be associated with him. After that, I walked away with my grandparents, and since then, we have been living in a hotel, preparing to go back. There's a lot of catching up that I have to do with my grandparents since I haven't known these people, and there's also so much to talk about regarding my parents. The only reason we haven't returned yet is because this morning my father finally contacted my grandfather and told him that what he did was just not right, and he had apparently accused his parents of trying to control him his entire life and never letting him be happy. He also accused me of trying to ruin him by showing up at the wedding like that, saying that I just couldn't stand to see him happy with anybody else. He's blaming us all because now Melissa is refusing to talk to him, and the wedding was obviously called off yesterday itself, just after we had left. So, was I wrong for showing up to my father's second wedding with his parents and exposing him for being a liar? Update 1 hello. It's been 4 days since the wedding was called off. My grandparents, and I decided not to respond to my father. He doesn't deserve it. If he wants to speak to us, he knows where to find us. We are still staying at the hotel. We've given him the details and told him that if he wants to discuss things with us, he can visit us, and then we can talk in person. But this isn't the kind of discussion we want to have over the phone or via text. He still hasn't shown up yet, and there are only 3 days before I return to Iowa with my grandparents. They have a farm there. They're quite well off, and I'll be taken care of far better than I was here. They promised me they'll ensure I go to the college of my choice and won't have to suffer after this. My grandparents have been literally doting on me ever since we got to know each other, and I think they're trying to make up for lost time, which is pretty sweet of them. They dislike my mother, and after this, they dislike my father as well, but they seem to love me a lot. Update 2 so my grandparents and I are scheduled to depart in 2 days. This morning, my father finally decided to pay us a visit and speak with us. I was quite surprised to find him in my grandparents' hotel room when they called me this morning, but I recovered quickly and decided I would not speak to him the entire time until he apologized. But obviously, that's too much to expect from someone like him. He was here only to discuss how unfair it was that my grandparents had decided to cut him out of their lives and give all the inheritance to me instead. He said he had already lost his wife, my mother, and he had lost Melissa as well. I also didn't wish to speak to him anymore, so things were pretty bad for him already. To top it all off, all the guests who had been present at the wedding, his coworkers and close friends, are now acting strangely with him because of what happened at the wedding. So his reputation is in shambles, and he's even considering quitting his job because he doesn't think he can work in such a hostile environment, to put it mildly. He has kind of lost everything he had until a few days ago, but then we came along at the wedding, exposed him, and then ruined all for him. So the least we could do for him was at least let him have the inheritance, which is something he had been working on for all these years, because otherwise he wouldn't have lied to all of us for so long in the first place. But he just wanted to make everybody happy, which is why he had started telling lies, and he promised that he had wanted to tell his parents the truth after he got married to my mother. But then as time went on, it just got more and more awkward to bring up, so he had to keep up with his lies and plan an elaborate double life. He claimed that he was the victim in the situation because, after all, it was his happiness that everybody was against, including his parents. So now he was only here to demand what actually belonged to him, the inheritance, since I would be taken care of anyway. But he had been hoping for this and working for this from the very beginning, and it was unfair to just take it away from him for such a petty reason. I was already furious about the way he was acting like he was the victim, and when he said he deserved that inheritance, I completely lost it. Before my grandparents could even say anything, I burst out at him and said that if he really deserved that inheritance, then I had also deserved to be treated like a human being for the past 17 years. But he had never shown me any sort of love or affection or even the bare minimum respect, and he had literally threatened to kick me out and use my college fund for his own personal expenses if I did not participate in his insanity and encourage his marriage to his young girlfriend just 2 weeks after I'd lost my mother. If he could not offer me anything that I deserved, it was only fair that his parents took away whatever he believed he deserved. He was quite shocked by my behavior because I had never been able to stand up to my dad like this, but now that I had my grandparents to support me, I was not afraid of him anymore. He even tried to glare at me, which would usually work when I was younger, and try to shut me down, but this time I was not going to shut up and just let him walk all over me. Earlier, I would only do that because I knew that my mother wouldn't leave no matter what, probably because of the same reason that my father did not cut ties with his parents. Because of the money, which proved to be pretty useless in the end since she passed away. She's only lucky that she passed away in a good hospital, but other than that, there was no benefit to her staying with my father after her diagnosis. Anyway, when I refused to be quiet, my dad tried to yell at me and shut me down, but my grandparents were there to remind him that this was not going to work anymore. After a bit of arguing, he finally had to leave because my grandparents threatened to call security on him and have him escorted out. They made it very clear to him that he was not going to receive anything until he acknowledged and accepted his mistakes, and even then, it would take a lot for them to forgive him. And if I decided that I wanted to keep the inheritance for myself, he was not going to receive anything anyway. So he left like a child, throwing a tantrum, and promised that he was going to make sure that we paid the price for what we had done to him. I don't know what he thought he was doing. He probably thought that in behaving like I was going to scare us, but it really did not. It just made us even more sure that we were doing the right thing by not forgiving him, and he wasn't even sorry, so we can't even forgive him. I am glad that I'm leaving with my grandparents in a couple of days, because I just want to get away from all of this now. I'm definitely going to miss my friends, but it doesn't matter anymore. I'm going to college in the fall. I've already graduated high school, and I'm just done with all of this now. Update 3. Hi everyone. It's been a year since I left home. For the past couple of months, I've been really busy with college, which is why I wasn't able to post anything. I had pretty much forgotten about it anyway. After that fight with my dad in the hotel room that day, which I mentioned in my last update, my grandparents and I departed. For the next few weeks after that, we had no contact with my dad, but I definitely got to meet a lot of people from my father's side of the family who all love me. And I think this is the family I had deserved all along. My mother had probably tried to love me, but she was too selfish, and in the end, it hurt me more than it hurt her. My uncle has promised me that I don't have to worry about my college tuition. He's going to have it all covered, and that's been a huge relief to me. These people had barely known me for just a few weeks, but they had already decided they were going to give me all the love I'd been missing out on for these past 17 years, and I could not be more thankful for it. I couldn't spend much time with them because a few months after I had moved in with my grandparents, I had to leave for college. But I do get to see them on weekends because the college I'm attending is pretty close to where they are, so no complaints about that. My father has tried to contact me several times, not to apologize, but to remind me that I have ruined him and that I should feel guilty about it, which is why I need to talk to my grandparents and ensure that he is not cut out of the inheritance at any cost. He keeps sending me emails and messages from different accounts, but he just doesn't seem to realize that getting defensive isn't helping his case. The only thing that can help him is a genuine and sincere apology, but honestly, at this point, it's too little, too late. I'm just going to stick to ignoring him. Honestly, responding to him is simply not worth it, and I don't have that kind of time or energy to indulge his delusions. Anyway, I finally have the family I deserve, and I'm happy with them. I'm also enjoying my college life so far, so I'm going to focus on the positives in my life right now and try to forget about my past because I really just want to move on in life and do better for myself.